Good evening, everybody. Michael here, and welcome to week 0 of the Azure Certification Mentoring program. Super excited to have everybody here. And tonight, what we're going to go over is we're going to really get the program kicked off. We're going to take a look at a number of different things. So we're going to just talk a little bit why we're here. Most of us should know that if you saw my talk at the Research Triangle PowerShell user group. So we know why we're here, why we want to get certified. So all of you are pretty much invested. We know what we're going on. So we're going to go through and just really dive into how do we go through planning, because planning is so important for, pretty much anything. But in order to get certified and in order to learn the things we need in order for you to pass AZ 104, we need to make sure to have a good plan for that. So we're going to talk about cert planning in a nutshell. We're going to take a look at the AZ 104 exam guide just so you have an understanding of really what we have ahead of us to look at. We're going to talk about time availability, look at assessing our skills. So we're going to take a look at a skills assessment that'll allow you to really hone in to see where you're at so you know where to focus on over the next few weeks. I'll show you some things that I have set up in Trello to help you plan everything out. We'll talk about setting some goals, trying to get your exam scheduled for the end of the week, and we'll talk about a bunch of other things. So let's just kind of dive into it. So we all know why we're here. We're here because we want to learn. We want to learn about the cloud, and in particular, we want to learn about Azure. And in this case, we're going to be really focused on AZ 104. But the important thing to understand about the path that we're going on over the next couple months is we're really building a framework for learning. And this is really designed as a way for you to learn how to plan, prepare, execute, and go on a learning plan. So I'm going to be showing you some stuff that's based on my learning that I'm currently doing to pass the AWS it's the Associate Architect exam. And even though we're not talking about Azure here, what we're going to be talking over the next couple of months is really going to be a system that you can utilize, whether it be for Azure, whether it be for AWS, Cisco, security training, what have you. It's really going to be building a system and tools that allow you to better learn and grow and build skills that you need in the workforce. So as you probably remember from the talk that I did previously, I'm not going to be teaching you the things that are on the Azure exam. We're going to be talking about, and you should be building a group of resources to use, whether they be videos, whether they be documentation, hands-on, all of those sorts of things. You're going to be responsible for going out, doing the learning, doing the hands-on, watching the videos, those sorts of things. But I'm going to be here to help mentor. We will have opportunities for you asking questions and those sorts of things. So that kind of brings us to, let's take a look at the plan here. So as you can see here, this is a Trello board that you have access to. And as you can see, we have all of the weeks listed out. And in each week, I'm going to have, as you can see here, you probably saw this at the beginning, this is going to be really the schedule, what I'm going to talk about in each one of my talks. And this is kind of a way, it's got links here. You can click on each one of these, and this will take you to those specific things that we're talking to. So basically a hyperlink. It's also a way for you to kind of get an idea, what are we going to talk about this week? So if you have any questions throughout the week, you can always throw those in. Also in the week, I'll also have a goals checklist. So this is super important. So the goals for this week are you're gonna be preparing and planning for kicking off, starting to study for AZ 104 next week. You're gonna gather your resources. You're gonna take the knowledge assessment we're gonna talk about in a couple minutes. We wanna make sure that over the next week, you determine what your exam date is because it's super important in the planning process. Then you're going to go through and create a plan based on each of the objective domain areas and set some due dates. And then hopefully by the end of the week, we want you to schedule the exam because that's super important. Because if you think of it, I don't know if any of you have ever done like a 5K or any sort of race, is that, if you don't sign up for the race and you don't know what date it is, chances are that you're not going to do very well in preparing to get up to it. So I know for myself and a lot of people that I've talked to, whether it be exam takers or subject matter experts, people in the field that talk to people about certification, signing up for the exam is super important because it lays that foundation of a marker of a goal for you to work towards. So that's a super important thing we want to get done this week. Then you'll see I'll have a number of cards here in Trello that'll have some links. And some of these links are the same ones that I have underneath the planning. Down at the bottom, and you notice that I have this across each of the weeks, please drop all your questions below. We're going to try something a little bit different. In order to keep things encapsulated inside of Trello and to keep me from generally going crazy from having a Slack channel here, a Discord there, Teams, all of that stuff going on, I can have everything that we're doing together in a single place. And this allows you to put your questions here so everybody can participate. So if you see here, I've got an example. So I just have an example question. I've just created a card. Notice the add card here. And what's the best resources for the hands-on certification? Notice I've just given a description here of, ways to work through this card. So chances are when a question comes up here, I'll put an answer in here or somebody else will chime in with an answer. If you think that's a great answer, put a thumbs up. If you'd like a little bit more detail into it, it just doesn't meet your needs, notice there's a little bellhop bell. You can use the bellhop emoji in that and just go, hey, can you explain that a little bit more? And we'll go into a little bit more detail. So what this will do is this will really allow me to be able to make sure that I'm answering your questions. But chances are if you have a question, somebody else on this within the program also has that question as well. So I can provide the answer to everybody. So do me a favor though, when you do have a question, make sure you go up here and when you create your card, notice there's a members here. I've already added myself. You can go ahead and add me as a member. And if you want to add yourself as a member so you get notified anytime anything happens on the card, you can definitely do that. By adding me, that makes sure that I get notified because I can tell you I spend my entire day in Trello. It's always open. It's my go-to tool. So hopefully over this process, I don't over Trello you and you get to understand what a cool tool it is for being able to visualize work and to be able to work through the work. So this is going to be our plan, and I'll have our plan every week. We'll go through that. And then as I'm building out the rest of the weeks, I'll be dropping things in here. So you notice I've got something in week 1 for some study prep. I found a really cool blog podcast from Josh Duffney that talks about how to take better notes. So I'm going to be putting things like that in there that you don't necessarily have to partake in them, but it's me just trying to provide you more tools for you to choose from to hopefully make it easier for you to get through this process. So that kind of digs into kind of the planning. We went through the planning board. We talked about the cert planning. So really getting down to planning is we want to take a look at the exam guide. So I have the exam guide open here, and you notice they've actually added something pretty cool that I just want to super call out right here. If you happen to be somebody that's a job seeker that's been impacted by COVID-19, you can actually schedule an exam for $15. I think that's a super cool of Microsoft to do. And so, if you have the opportunity and you fit to that, the limited time offer, make sure to definitely take advantage of that. Otherwise, you can schedule through the Pearson VUE and go through the scheduling process there. If we take a look down here, it shows us all of the different skills measured. So the 5 different areas that we're going to look at. The big area that you want to make sure is to take a look at the downloading the skills exam. And this brings up the PDF. And this is really what you're going to use for your plan. So you notice here, manage Azure identities and governance is 15 to 20% of the exam. This is known as this is what's known as an objective domain, or an OD. So there's 5 ODs, and then underneath those you have, in this case, we have manage Azure Active Directory, Azure AD objects. This is a functional group. And then underneath there, you see we have all of the different objectives of all of the things that you need to cover for that functional group. So it's important when you're planning out that you understand what exactly you have to learn going through this process. So we need to be able to manage Azure identities and governance. We need to implement and manage storage, which is at a similar 15 to 20%. Notice we get down here to deploy and manage Azure compute resources, bumps us up to about 20 to 25%. Notice configure and manage virtual networking gets into 25 to 30, because virtual networking is really the glue in Azure outside of identity. It's super important that you have a really strong background on that virtual networking. And last, we have monitor and backup. Azure Monitor and Azure Backup and Azure Site Recovery is 10 to 15%. So when it comes to the planning, you're like, okay, what do I need to spend my most time on? Well, 25 to 30% of the exam is going to be on virtual networking, so you need to make sure that you're super spot on with that. If you have a good background in Azure Monitor and Backup and Site Recovery, you might not need to spend as much time with it. So it's super important you have the understanding, you have the ideas going through of everything that's on the exam. And so that brings us to the assessment tool. So if we take a look at the assessment tool, and I went out, I created a GitHub, I forked the repo of 5.9s for all of their exam assessments, and I redid the exam assessment for 104, so it's up to date. So if you see here, basically what it has a first page that gives you an overview, and it brings everything in the confidence level for each of the objective domains. Here's where I really want you to take some time this week, and you go in and you choose for each of the different areas, say create users and groups in Azure AD. Do you know that well? Do you know it a little bit, or do you have no idea? And then you go through for each of the different objectives and you fill those in. I've also created an example so you can kind of see what that looks like. So I went through here and just filled in some self-assessment stuff, known well on a number of Azure AD stuff, known a little bit for subscriptions and governance, storage and stuff, know well. And notice containers, Azure App Service, I had no idea in there. And I just put some information in here, kind of like probably many of you would have different areas. Some you're going to know well, some you're going to have no idea, some you'll know a little bit about. And what it basically does is does some calculations, and at the end, it gives you an assessment. It shows that your confidence level in Azure Identities and Governance, mine is about 83%. Notice implement and manage storage, I got 100% on that. So what this is going to mean for you when you're planning, go through this at the beginning. What are the areas you really need to focus in on. So those red areas. So I should probably spend a lot of time in Azure Compute Resources. And when I break that down, I know that most of those areas are going to be in containers and the Azure App Services. So this is a really great tool for you to be able to focus in, because one of the key things that I want to make sure that you are really doing as we go through this is really, I know it's a catchphrase, is working smarter and not harder. We all have limited time, whether it's, between our jobs and our families, our friends, all of the things that we have pulling at us. Studying for something like this is a big lift. It's a big ask of ourselves. It's super important for ourselves, both for our, our mental health, for our learning, for our careers, all of those sorts of things. But it does require that it takes time away from other things. So we want to make sure we're super focused. And so if you're 100% on implement and manage storage in Azure, Probably the only thing you want to spend some time is maybe do some hands-on if you feel like you need to do that. Maybe doing some quick review of some docs. On Pluralsight, we've got some great exam alerts. Maybe just watching the exam alert for implement and manage storage to get you focused on the topics that are important for the exam. And then once you get into doing the test prep, using that as your focus. But use this as a tool for you to be able to see where exactly you're at within the program. So next, let me get over to my screen here. So we covered the intro, we went to review, talked about cert planning, just talked about time availability. Now let's take a look at a Trello review board that I created for AZ104, and the link's there right for you. And if you go over, this is available to you. You can go ahead if you want to. If you go click on Show menu, you can go and you can actually copy this board. So if you want to copy this board and make a copy of this board for yourself, you absolutely can, and you can fill it in the way you want. And this is what I would recommend for you to do. Make a copy of my board that I've created. I have all of the objective domains, and then you can start from here. And here's how I kind of want you to use this, and I'll show you an example in a couple of minutes of how I've used it in the past, is I want you to break up each of these different areas and think about these as knowledge chunks. And what I've put inside here is, you see at the top, these are my video resources that I have for this specific OD. So we have our links to Pluralsight, we have a Cloud Guru. One link I didn't have in here that you could take a look at as well. There's a company out there called cloudskills.io run by a MVP, super great guy, Mike Pfeiffer. He's a super knowledgeable guy. Him and Tim Warner did a great course on AZ104. So that's definitely an option for you. So you pick whatever your resources. Notice I have a link out for docs and hands-on as well. So here you can add in a list. If you want to create a checklist, you can definitely put a checklist in here. Trello is a really easy and fun tool, I think, for being able to combine being able to visualize your work and also being able to add checklists and things like that. And notice I just have those placeholders for videos, docs, hands-on, which are the major pieces in each of the different areas. And notice down here what I've done then. Let's say I'm going to be using the Pluralsight videos. Pluralsight, I believe in the backup Azure and monitor Azure resources. I believe there's 2 videos. I did one on backup and Tim Warner did one on monitoring. I believe there's an exam alert for that as well. So what I did here is I simply created a card for myself, watch the Microsoft Azure manage Microsoft Azure Active Directory objects, which now that I read that, hey, that's the wrong one for this area, but I think you get my understanding here. You'd go and you'd put the videos in that fit in with here. And then what I did is I added a due date here. And here's how I kind of set up the dates is once I have my practice exam, or once I have my exam date, in this case, I've got July 30th, I kind of work my way back. And we see that the first week we're going to be starting stuff is on June 14th. So, okay, I've got my exam date out, July 30th. I've got my first day that I'm starting out is June 14th. Let's jump in and watch a video on that day. And then what I do for myself in each of these different areas, I have a card of this represents the entire body of knowledge that I'm going to cover in this OD. So by June 20th, I want to complete monitor and backup of Azure resources, the entire OD. And I set a date on that. And what that allows me to do, Trello has these things called power-ups. If for some reason the calendar doesn't show up for you, you just kind of go into the more area here, and then you'll be able to go into, where's my power-up showing up? Oh, yeah, on the menu page here. Notice the power-ups down here. I have the calendar one. If it doesn't show up, it's going to allow you to add one. You just search for calendar. you add the calendar power up. And what that does is anything I put a due date on is it's going to put a calendar on here for me. And this allows me to really visualize this. So the first week, what I like to start out with the first week, I like to build my stuff week to week. So on like the 12th or 13th, probably what I would do is I'd take a look at my week, what do I have going on, and then lay out the due dates for all of the things that I want to try to accomplish each day. And then if I feel like it, maybe I start throwing markers down for each of the other weeks. So we'll get out of the calendar here. So if I wanted to lay down for the Azure Identities and Governance, implement and manage storage, all the different ones, I would add dates into those. I could just go in here, add in a date, and let's say I want to have that one due by the 25th. Save. Notice that now adds that into my calendar. So that gives me a way to be able to visualize that. And let's say, okay, I'm in this week, that's not going to work. I can actually drag and drop. I could just drag this to the 30th of June, and that'll change that for you. So I really like the way that works with Trello. And then what's nice about here is if I complete this, I check that, notice that turns green. So every time my goal here is to get everything green so that I know that I've completed those things. So here's what a board looks like. And I realize that this is a lot of stuff going on because I basically fleshed out the entire learning program that I was doing for the AWS cohort internally. And you'll notice I have a ton of red here. We had some stuff going on at work that kind of pushed back this program. So that's why I'm kind of red here. I need to take some time tomorrow to readjust some of these dates. And that's something I want you to keep in mind as well. Yes, we want to set that date for the exam, but I know life happens. If a couple weeks out from the exam, let's say work is really hectic or things are going on at home and you're just not able to put in the time, go ahead and push that exam out. There's nothing wrong with that. That's playing smart. What's playing dumb is waiting till the last minute and realizing you're not ready for the exam and then either not taking it or taking it and not being prepared for it. So take that a couple weeks out, and we'll talk about this in a few weeks. About a couple weeks out, am I ready for the exam? If I am, boom, let's hit those last 2 weeks. If you're not, do a little reassessment, see where you're at, and maybe adjust. So you'll notice here I broke out each of the modules for the exam. We also have labs associated with these on Pluralsight. So I put in all of those labs, and when I completed those, notice over under resources, I have some documentation I wanted to make sure to read. I have when I'm taking different practice exams. I also have a cleanup here. One of my tools, and we're going to talk about this in a future discussion, is when I do hands-on, I like to just basically set up resources in the cloud and start playing with it. So that's what I'm doing with a lot of these courses on AWS is I've created a AWS subscription and I've got resources running out there. They're costing me money. So I put a card here to remind myself to delete these at the end because I've been on the other end of this where I've forgotten about resources and end up having a bill I'm like, why do I have a bill from AWS? Oh, I forgot to delete my resources from when I was studying. So it's just a reminder of that for me. So I hope this gives you an idea of how you can kind of lay out and plan your things. I realize for some people, this may seem like it's overthought and over-engineered, but for me and a lot of people I've talked to, laying these things out and having a flexible way to work with them and showing exactly all of the work that I need to do makes it easier to be able to get through all of the work and also to see where have I come from and how much work do I still have left to go. So if you have any questions about Trello, how you're using Trello, definitely drop me questions in there. If we have a lot of people having issues with Trello and how to work it and the plan, maybe what I'll do is I'll do a pop-up webinar where we'll just answer some questions on Trello. So we went through the AZ104 board. We went through the AWS board. And so let's talk about setting a goal date. So I asked you a question in the email. I asked you, how much time a week can you put towards this? So with that amount of time in mind and taking a look at the resources you have, and I've put some resources in here at the end that you can take a look at. Let's see, where did we put those? Under media recommendations, we got Pluralsight, Cloud Guru, Cloud Skills for practice exams, WizLabs. They have a really cool offer through cloudskills.io, $47 a year for unlimited. So if you're planning on taking a couple of certifications this year, this is a great deal. So you could do 104, you could do 303, 304, you could do an AWS exam. They've got hundreds of exams. You could do practice exams. Measure Up is an option as well. If you're going to do the Measure Up option, choose to take the voucher that they offer you when you sign up for your exam, because they give you a discount on the Measure Up exam when you buy it with your voucher. So that's just my real recommendation for that. Then we got written content. Totally recommend docs on Microsoft.com. Another great option is Learn Azure in a Month of Lunches, the second edition by a super smart guy. He used to work at Microsoft. Now he works at Google. But Ian Foltz wrote a great book on Azure, and it's got a lot of really great information on it. And I love the month of lunches concept because it totally fits in on our concept of trying to find time. Is that when you're thinking about your time, you could really take an hour a week just from your lunches. But you want to figure out, okay, how much time do you have? And use that as a way to determine, okay, how many weeks is it going to take for me to get through all the video content? How many weeks is it going to take for me to get through all of the hands-on content I need to do? How many weeks is it going to take for me to go through the different practice exams that I want to complete? And with that, you can usually come out with, here's where my end of, when I'm going to take my exam. Myself, a lot of people I've talked to, I recommend trying to take an exam in 45 to 60 days. The reason is that really is kind of you're committing to getting this done. Any longer than that, especially for AZ 104, maybe for 303, 304, maybe take a little bit longer, maybe up to 90 days. But really for AZ 104, if you take 90 to 120 days, there's probably a good chance that the stuff you learn in the beginning, you're going to forget by the time you get to the exam. So I like keeping them in a 45 to 60 day window because that allows you to make sure that you have all of that learning in place. So once you figure out what that day is, you could do that using Trello. You could do that, right now on your calendar. However it works for you to figure that out, figure out that date, and then go and schedule the exam by the end of the week. That way, you're putting the line in the sand. You know when that is. Like we said before, if you have to change that date at a later time, not a big deal. But set that goal now and work towards that. And next week, we're going to talk more about building out the schedule. So don't be worried this week about, oh, I need to build out my schedule, what I'm going to learn next week and all that. Just make sure you have an idea of stretched out, okay, here's generally when I'm going to, try to learn about the storage OD. This is when I'm going to try to look at the identity stuff. And then be really focused on getting together those goals we talked about of, getting your resources all together. Make sure you have that. Make sure that probably the top thing on the list is really take that knowledge assessment, because that's really going to allow you to be able to determine what exactly you need to focus on over the next weeks as you're diving into the different material. So I think that really dives it into the planning. So I just want to just kind of finish up talking about a couple cool things we've got going on. I reach out to a couple of people that I have a ton of respect for. I reach out to Tim Warner and Josh Duffney, and I'm going to be getting on talks with both of them, and both of them are going to share their knowledge with us on test taking and preparing. And I'm super excited for these conversations, and I'm trying to get some more of these type of conversations that we're going to spread out throughout the mentoring program. So definitely stay tuned for those. I'm not sure if it's probably going to be a week or two before we'll get some of those conversations out. But think about it this way. We're building a toolbox here for not just this exam, but for multiple exams. And we have a lot of things to cover. We're going to cover things later on that you're going to be like, hey, I really wish I would have known that earlier. But the thing is, we can only lay so much on ourselves. We need to build a foundation. So even if we learn something a little bit later, at least you learn that before we take this exam, but you'll have it for the next exam you take down the road. So definitely look forward to that. Make sure you review the goals checklist. And then next week, we're going to get into planning for your week and really starting to take a look at studying. And we'll take a look at some study habits. We'll take a look at some tools for that and those sorts of things. The last thing I wanted to mention, and I think I'll probably put either a poll inside a Trello either tonight or in the next couple of days, is I'm thinking about a couple things. One, I'm thinking about doing something like an office hours. So picking a time during the week where for an hour or two, I'd be available online for live questions, if people wanted to chat about stuff, that sort of thing. Just to kind of make, get a little bit more real-time live interaction. The challenge is going to be with that is that we might have people across different time zones and, everybody can't make each time. So if we do end up doing an office hours, I'll set a time for it. If you can make it, great. If you can't, we'll definitely record those. So those will be available. And if there's something super important that comes out, I'll make sure to either put out a post about it or an email or put something in Trello about that. The other thing that I'm thinking about as well, this first video we did as this is a recording. You're watching this after I've done it. I'm thinking about maybe doing it as a live stream. Not sure whether that's the road I want to go down yet, but I am definitely think about that. And we'll take the next week to kind of, I'd love to hear your feedback on how you think this is working through the next week. Did I give you the information you needed? Would you have preferred to have it in a different medium? You'll notice that I didn't use a ton of slides tonight because, quite frankly, I work in PowerPoint every single day. And I felt like we really didn't need to have a bunch of slides to go through and talk about the things that were important. So any feedback you have, please feel free to, add those into the comments below and let me know about that. If you don't feel like putting them in a public forum, feel free to just drop me an email. I appreciate any and all feedback, whether it's positive or whether it's, constructive feedback of something I can do better. I'm always looking to improve those sort of things because at the end of the day, this is all for you to be able to learn these tools and to learn Azure and to get certified and those sorts of things. So if there's something that I'm doing that doesn't work for you or you'd like to see done a little bit differently, let me know about that and we can have a chat about that. And if I feel like, that's something, hey, I definitely missed out on that, I'd love to add that in there. So I know that was a ton of stuff. We're coming in here at about 35 minutes, which is about kind of the time frame I wanted to keep with this. I didn't want it to be something huge like the 90 plus minute, calls at the Research Triangle PowerShell user group. But I wanted to make sure we covered a ton of stuff, and I know we did. So with that, I hope you have an amazing week. Looking forward to working with you this week. Make sure to add any of your questions into, just add a card here, type in your question that you have. I'll make sure to get to it, work through your plans, start working on those. If you have any, if you're like, hey, what do you think about this plan? Just drop me an email. Everybody's got my email address. I'm happy to take a few minutes to take a look at your plan that you've built out and provide you some feedback on what I think about that. The one caveat I will do with that is, it might take me a day to get back to you depending on what I have going on. And the second thing is, I can give you feedback on a plan, but if I don't know everything about it, if I don't know what you have going on in your life, I might be like, well, I think you can do more this week. But if I don't know exactly what's going on with you, it might be hard. But we can definitely have that conversation. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the talk tonight. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.